In 2016, I had my genetics tested and I went to a company to get it done. And when I had my reading, the doctor came in. It was actually a doctor who was on their staff and who was a friend of a friend. So he did me a favor and did my reading himself. He explained my results. And he told me, just by looking at me, he said, I could tell that you are highly androgenic, which means I have more androgens. And I was like, oh, well, that's super cool that you can tell just by looking at me. He's like, yeah, he's like, genetics can tell a very interesting story, including whether or not hormone therapy is right for you. And so when he came in, he's like, if you are on any type of hormones, and at the time I was taking bioidentical, a topical progesterone. This was like so many years ago. And like I said, and he was like, you should go off it, go off it, go off it right away. Like today, go off it. And he scared me and I went off it immediately. And looking back and after today's conversation, I'm like, maybe I went off it too quickly. Maybe I should have consulted somebody who really understood hormones for women, specifically in perimenopause and menopause, because there are so many sides to stories, right? You could look at blood work, you could look at genetic reports, you could look at the Dutch test, which we're going to talk about, which is urine metabolites, and you could, or with your, it's a urine lab test, and you could be told certain things, but without having the whole picture, it might do us a disservice. And I just wonder if I had I stuck with taking my bioidentical progesterone, and because I now know that I was in perimenopause at the time, that I might have had less symptoms. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But because I never did it, I actually will never know, I guess, right? So I just think that it's important if you're considering bioidentical hormones, just work with a practitioner that understands it. Work with a practitioner that will test your hormones after you start it, that will do a test, whether it's a urine test or a blood test, that will look at how, or a DNA test, whatever it is, how are your urine how are your estrogens breaking down? How are they metabolized in your system? You know, these are all important questions that I want you to look at. I want you to be the captain of your own ship and ask questions, and don't just take the information just at face value because somebody that you think knows more than you knows more about your health, when in fact, nobody knows more about your health than you. So I really want you to make sure that when you are working with somebody that you work energetically, you're comfortable, and they're doing the proper testing to know what's best for your body. And today's guest, when I asked her the questions, she said, yes, I do these type of testings. And that's what I love to see in a practitioner that helps women in perimenopause and menopause. So I'm going to introduce you to our guests in a moment. But before I do, I just want to do a quick intro to who I am. I'm Andrea Donsky. I'm a nutritionist for almost 20 years, and I'm in menopause. I'm a menopause educator. I'm a soon-to-be published, 4-time published menopause researcher. We're just getting started. And I'm the co-founder of wearemorphus.com, a company that helps to empower you to take control of your health and symptoms with nutrition, lifestyle, supplements, and research. Today, I'm speaking with Karen Martell. She's the CEO of Hormone Solutions, and she heads a clinic and product line offering bioidentical hormone therapy and a holistic approach to addressing hormonal dysfunction in women during perimenopause and menopause. As a certified hormone specialist and a transformational nutrition coach, Karen is a distinguished authority in women's weight loss and hormonal health. As the esteemed host of the highly acclaimed women's health podcast, The Hormone Solution with Karen Martell, which I'm on very soon and I can't wait, she delves deeply into the intricacies of female fat loss, hormone optimization, and the complex interplay between hormones and overall health. Karen's mission is to empower women with the knowledge they require to seize control of their well-being and thrive throughout every stage of life. Now, here's Karen. Welcome to Menopause Reimagined, Karen.
Well, thank you for having me, Andrea. It's been a long time coming, and I'm glad we're finally doing this.
I know, me too. And, you know, I'm excited to talk about hormones because, as I always say, and my listeners know, is that hormones are out of my lane. I talk about nutrition, lifestyle, supplements, and research. So I'm always happy to have a hormone expert on the show, which is what you are. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background so we could set the stage for what we're going to discuss today?
Yeah, so I got into this because, of course, my own history of terrible hormonal dysfunction from a very young age. And I've kind of got two stories, but I'll just shorten it up so that we don't take forever. But basically, after the birth of my first child, when I was in my early 30s, I finished breastfeeding and suddenly started having so many health problems and gaining rapid weight, where it was like, like, oh, just like that, 10 pounds is put on. And it's like, oh, it's going to keep going. And so I did what every woman does. And I started to work out harder, started to, try every diet under the sun, calorie count, starve myself. It was terrible. I couldn't sleep. I had chronic insomnia. I had digestive issues, no libido, depression, PMS, migraines. And I mean, this all came on very suddenly. And it was just getting worse and worse no matter what I did. And so eventually, after like being told by my doctor, like, oh, here's your antidepressant, here's your sleeping pills, work out harder. That's what I was being told everywhere, was just work out harder, eat better. And I was finally like, why do I not look like the other women here at CrossFit? I'm just getting fatter, and I couldn't figure it out. And so finally I was like, I think this is hormonal. And I ended up getting a saliva hormone test done by a friend of mine who was a naturopath, and figured out like my hormones were a complete disaster. Cortisol was shot, DHEA was shot. So there I was doing everything you're not supposed to do when you have adrenal insufficiency, right? I was working out like a crazy woman, not starving myself, like the stress. I was a single mother of a toddler at the time. So I basically had to like revamp my whole life, figured it out that it was hormonal, decided after that, there's got to be more women like me, because I was doing everything right and what the science says, and, this whole calorie in, calorie out. And yet I was just gaining weight. And there was times, Andrea, I went down to like 800 calories. So
Oh,
I
I'm sure.
proved that calorie restriction, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
For some people, yes, I'm sure, I know it does. But for me and for women with hormonal weight loss resistance, it's not the answer. And so, fast forward 10 years, I had it all figured out. I had maintained my weight. I was feeling amazing. Thought I had it like, oh yeah, this is great. Perimenopause, menopause, no problem. Like, had somebody even asked me back then, like, what do you think that's going to be like? I would have been like, oh, a couple of months of hot flashes and I'll be done, and then my period's just going to disappear. And I became a nutritionist and started helping women with hormonal weight loss resistance. And once again, just thought I had it figured out. And then in my early 40s, I was put on some medication and figured out that I had this thyroid problem, and was put on the wrong thyroid medication, and ended up kind of heading into perimenopause really, really quickly, so that I actually was starting to go into menopause. And this is at 42. So I was losing my period. I had hot flashes and night sweats, and I gained between 15 to 20 pounds in less than 6 months. Like, once again, it was like this repeat happened, where I was like, what, why, no, how could this possibly be happening again? Like, it was terrible. And I didn't know it was because of what happened with the thyroid till a long time afterwards. But basically, once again, came out of that going, geez, me, the nutritionist, the weight loss coach, the hormonal weight loss resistant expert, and this happened to me again. That means there's that majority of women don't know that this can happen and don't know what their options are when it comes to perimenopause and menopause. And so after that, I figured all this out. I went on a mission to help women in perimenopause and menopause and get the information out there. And I became a certified hormone specialist, and I have done nothing but research this now for the last 6 years, and am trying to spread the word that, hey, ladies, we are not being told what we should be getting told. And we think that, you and I, Andrea, we think, oh, you look around in social media in our world, and it's like, wow, menopause is the hottest topic, and perimenopause, hot topic. Everybody's talking about it. This is 1%. Like, honestly, every day, like even my sisters, they're my sisters, came to me recently. The one sister was like, I can't believe this is happening to me. Like, what is happening to me? And I'm like, yeah, this is perimenopause. Like, you're losing your hormones. And every day I have women coming to me saying, oh, my doctor told me that hormone replacement therapy is going to kill me. It's going to give me breast cancer. And, like the stories I hear on a daily basis prove to me we are a drop in the bucket right now. And there is so much more education that's needed.
Oh my gosh, yes. And it's because we live and breathe it, right? So we're
Yeah.
following people who are in menopause. So exactly, but for the mass market and for the majority of people, right? It's still, there's so much education that needs to happen. First of all, for the women themselves, like you're saying, for the doctors, for the medical community, for our partners, like there's so much that it's happening, but so much more that still needs to be done. So you are so right. I just want to go back to one thing you mentioned, just so we have a clear definition for our listeners. You mentioned the word adrenal, or the words adrenal insufficiency. Can you explain what that means and why our adrenal glands, why do they play such an important role as we go into menopause?
Yes. And so the word used to be, of course, adrenal fatigue, which everybody I think is pretty familiar with at this time. And they used to think it was like you were super stressed out for a long period of time. Your adrenals got worn out and they stopped functioning as well. And then your cortisol levels and your DHEA levels would drop. So DHEA, for your listeners, it's another adrenal hormone. It's also an anti-aging hormone. It's also a pro-hormone. And so it's got many different functions in the body. It's one of the most abundant hormones in our body. Besides, it goes testosterone and DHEA are at the top of the pile. And then estrogen and progesterone come
And it
underneath that,
decreases
actually.
as we age. It decreases as we age.
Yeah. And DHEA goes down and cortisol goes up typically as we age. But adrenal insufficiency, what they've realized now is that, okay, it's not a fatigue, it's an insufficiency. And what typically happens is we're super stressed out, or really, we're just living nowadays, especially women. Like our stress is super normalized.
Yeah.
Like we don't think, like back then when I was talking about when I was 33 and that was happening to me, never in a million years had someone said to me, oh, it's your adrenals, would I have believed that. I never saw myself as a stressed out person.
Because it's so relevant now and we're so used
yes.
to it, right? So like you're saying, it's been
Yes.
so normalized that chronic stress is just, oh yeah, it's just part of what my daily routine.
It's what we do. I mean, I was doing what every other woman's doing. I was holding down a job. I was raising a child. I was, I was working out like crazy. I was dieting. I was like,
Yeah.
all that is stress. And you come out of a pregnancy, especially, and you don't sleep, you got a newborn, and we tend to be older now when we're having children, and our bodies just aren't the same as they were in your teens and in your 20s. And that is ideally when we're supposed to be getting pregnant. And so the older you get, the harder it is on your system. And so you have this high stress, you're not sleeping very well. Maybe you're working full time, because it's expected now of women that we work full time. Plus we still usually are the caregivers, the main caregivers to children. I mean, not my husband, but I know many men still have that kind of male female role. It's just I just hear about that. It's not me being like sexist or anything. It's just that's what I hear from other women. And we're still like doing the cooking, the cleaning. It's amazing. Like what? And women, we just we judge our worth on how much we do in a day. So we're just go, 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 go. We're trying to manage all of these things at one time, and we normalize it, but your body does not see that as normal. So cortisol goes up because you're in this high stress state, this go, 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 adrenaline, dopamine, like social media, the lights in the environment. Like it's not just like when we think of stress, it's not just, oh, my job is stressing me out, or I've got so much to do, so I'm stressed out. And that's what I used to relate stress to, was that like, I'm such a stressed out person. But people have to understand the toxic load is a stress to your body. The artificial lighting, the blue light, is a stress to our body. There's a connection between blue light, for heaven's sakes, and getting breast cancer, which is just like, what the heck? So there's these stressors. Yeah. And so it's not just what we think. It's the day to day, it's the lack of sleep, it's the diet, it's everything.
It's the additives in our food.
Yes, absolutely. It's everything. And so when you look at it like that, you think, wow, our stress bucket is constantly overflowing.
Mhm.
And we because it's so normal, we don't do anything about it. Like we talk about it, we hear like, oh, we need to be, manage our stress better and we need to take time for ourselves. Do we? No. And I know even I struggle with this. Like I need to listen to my own advice. Trust me, I'm very addicted to stress. I'm a high functioning, like type A, like go, go, go woman. And so it's hard for me to come down a notch. But your body, when it's running that high in cortisol for a long time, basically what your body does is it says, this isn't good. Like all this cortisol being pumped out constantly and the adrenaline being pumped out constantly, your body's smart and it's going to say, we can't keep going like this. And so you'll see it in labs. You'll see cortisol go up and you'll see it stay there for a period of time, sometimes years. And then suddenly it drops. And that's what was considered adrenal fatigue, but actually it's insufficiency. And so it's your body going, I'm going to down regulate this cortisol production. Typically what happens, cortisol goes up, DHEA goes up. If it stays there, stress stays there, DHEA comes down. So it starts to go, okay, I can't do this anymore. And it starts to fall. And then cortisol follows. So that's the typical pattern that we see until it's kind of a flat line and it's like, ugh. And then thyroid can start to get impacted. All of the other hormones, they all work synergistically together. So they'll start to get impacted as well. And then as we go into perimenopause and menopause, we see that in general, cortisol levels actually go up during this time. And this is for many different reasons. I think it's the time of our lives that it does tend to be quite a bit stress. There's a lot more stress going on for some women, but also the fall of our sex hormones, it's like we don't get the buffer anymore. Like our estradiol and progesterone and testosterone really impact mood. It impacts our neurotransmitters. So estradiol helps us to make serotonin, which is the antidepressant neurotransmitter. We've got progesterone, which is this beautiful buffer to stress and anxiety. And so when you don't ovulate in perimenopause as often anymore, and that starts to fall, that means you're not producing progesterone. So that calming effect that progesterone gives us is no longer there as often. And so stress goes up and our ability to tolerate stress goes down. And so that's why you'll hear women be like, I feel like my nervous system's shot. And like what you used to handle back in your 20s no longer is what you can handle in your 40s.
You know what you might find interesting is, so we have 4 abstracts that are being published in the journal Menopause in December, and one of them is on anxiety. And the anxiety survey shows us that 66% of women are more stressed now than they were before and were less able to cope with it. And then also that when we ask women, because sleep plays a role in that as well, you kind of alluded to it before, when we don't get enough sleep, it also can increase our stress and our cortisol levels. And we found out that the #1 reason women aren't sleeping well is because of stress. So like if you think about it, and then we analyze, this was interesting, we just got these results last week, because I'm writing my book and it's for our research chapter, is we broke the body down into different systems. And the #1 most impacted system in the body is the nervous system in menopause, in perimenopause and menopause. So everything you're saying is backed by our research, which is so interesting, right? But what I love about what you're explaining is you're explaining the hormonal aspect of it. So it's so fascinating to me. So, okay, so now we're like, okay, so you explained that really well. Thank you. So what do we say to women? They're like, okay, I can't handle my stress. I'm super anxious all the time. Either it's exacerbated or it's newly onset, whatever it is. Should women be going to their doctors? Because there's so much, when you listen to experts speak, some women are like, yes, go get your hormones checked. Other ones are like, don't get your hormones checked. I'd love to hear what your opinion is on it, especially for women in perimenopause, because that's when the hormones or estrogen and our progesterone, they're more estrogen's more fluctuating and our progesterone is falling. Like we know that you can't use a blood test to determine if you're in perimenopause alone, but in menopause you can, just because your hormones will be in the menopausal ranges. But what is your opinion on that? Because I really would I want everyone to understand, what can they do? Like, what can we do to empower ourselves so we understand what's happening with our hormones?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in lab testing, but they have to be put together with each individual woman's symptoms, because we are all so different. And I have worked literally with thousands of women at this point with their hormones. And I will tell you that it doesn't often match up. So when you have somebody that's in perimenopause, like you said, it's really hard to see it on labs. And so especially blood work. So blood work is going to be testing what's like the whole level of the hormones, the bound, the unbound. And so you get this kind of big picture of where it is on these stupid ranges. It's like, well, if you're anywhere between, you know, here in Canada, it's like, if you're between 50 and 2000, you are in range and you're good to go. And it's like, what? Really? Like, it's just ridiculous. They're super wide. They vary throughout the month because we're cycling and hormones are changing constantly. So it's very hard to see, like, well, are you? But if you know when you tested in your cycle, so we recommend women that are cycling, you go in on day 19, 20, or 21 of a 28-day cycle, or 7 days prior to the start of a period. And you look at a woman's progesterone and you look at her estrogen, where it's supposed to be in the luteal range on, you know, on the labs. Well, if she's at the bottom, or, you know, and her progesterone is near, maybe in range, but it's at the bottom of that range, and she's saying, you know, I'm not sleeping well, my periods are getting heavier, you can then go, you know what, you are in a perimenopausal range. It's just that some women will look like they have pretty good amounts because, like I said, this is testing all of our blood and like all of the hormone levels in the blood. And what we really want to see during the fertile years, especially, is what are the free levels of hormones. And so our hormones get carried around by something called sex hormone binding globulin. Think of it as like a bus that's going to shuttle your hormones all over your body. It's got to get off the bus in order to dock on that cell and for that cell to get that message and do its job. So blood work, it's not going to separate the two. And so unless it's testosterone is the only one that you'll see on labs where it'll say free testosterone levels and then total testosterone. All the other ones, we're seeing total progesterone, we're seeing total estradiol, total estrone. And so when we're in our fertile years, it's actually more accurate and you'll get a better picture of what's happening if you test via urine metabolite testing, so a Dutch test usually, or a saliva test. Both have their pros and cons to them, but they can give you a lot of information. And when you're having hormonal issues in those years of, let's say you're in your 20s, 30s, and even your early 40s, these tests can actually tell you a lot more than what blood work's going to do. So we try and do, like in our clinic, we try and do both. If somebody can afford both a urine test and the blood work, I highly recommend doing that so that you have this baseline of, okay, I feel like things are starting to shift. Let's see where the hormones are at. Go with that and how I'm feeling. See the different pathways my hormones are being metabolized down. And then from there, you have this like baseline to work from. And so you'll know, like, oh, look, in 1 year, my hormones went from here to here on my urine test, and I'm feeling this. And so I know that I need to get above where it was last year for me to feel my best. And so, and everybody's going to be different. And so I think that that's really something we have to get through our heads, because for someone like myself, who's genetically am very estrogenic, for me, if my estradiol goes down even a little bit, looks great on paper, looks great in labs, I don't feel well and I get all the symptoms of estrogen loss. So for me, estrogen is really important to stay on top of. For other people, it might be testosterone if they were born with, you know, being androgenic, which means more masculine.
I'm more androgenic.
You totally are. You can
Yeah.
see it, right? You've got you're thin in nature, right? And I can't see your body, but I'm guessing you're not like super, like you don't put weight on in your hips or anything like I do. Like I'm like, it's all
I'm
in
more,
my butt. I got boobs. I got,
yeah.
I'm estrogenic. And so for you, Andrea, it might be your testosterone. Like if your testosterone goes down or your DHEA, you could really feel that, and you might get a lot worse of symptoms compared to somebody like myself. I don't notice much with testosterone. So once you get past that perimenopausal phase, then things change when it comes to labs. And when you're in menopause, like I tell women, don't waste your money on a Dutch test. They're not cheap. They're $500 typically. And if you've got no hormones, which most menopausal women will have very low levels of estrogens, and they'll have very low levels of like almost non-existent progesterone, it will not show up accurately on that urine metabolite test, and you won't be able to get what you can get from a Dutch test. So I always tell women, if you're in menopause or late perimenopause, start with blood work. It's the cheapest, and we can still tell a lot from it, especially as when you're losing the hormones a little bit faster at that time. And we can get a really good idea because we can look at follicular stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, estrogen, testosterone, free testosterone, and we can get a good picture. And at that point, progesterone will usually be under range because they're not ovulating anymore. And if you're not ovulating, you ain't producing the bulk of your progesterone. And then once you get on HRT, if that's what you're choosing to do, then 3 to 6 months afterwards, or when you get to where your dosage is going to be for a period of time, then do a Dutch test so you can see, how am I breaking these hormones down? What are my free levels of hormones?
So happy you mentioned that. Like, I am just so happy because, and again, I'm not a hormone expert. I understand hormones really well, but I don't talk about them publicly because I'm not the expert on it. I've tried them myself. And I love that you're talking about looking at the metabolites, because that also plays a role with genetics, right? So genetics too, like if you know
Yes.
how you, like, exactly. So genetics play a big role. And I had all of this done when I was in perimenopause, although I didn't know I was in perimenopause at the time. And I took progesterone for many, many, many years, topical, to help me get pregnant because I had PCOS. I'm highly androgenic, like all of those things kind of that you're mentioning, which is so interesting. But I love that you're talking about doing the Dutch test, because I am a fan. And actually, Dr. Tara Scott, who's a triple board certified
Yes.
doctor, I
Love
love
Tara.
her, MD. She always talks about the fact that the Dutch test is, they have science now behind it, which is amazing. And she recommends it as well. And I love that you're talking about, let's look at what your metabolites are doing, because if they're breaking down into the 4 and the 16 more so than they are in the 2, like, you're going to be taking hormones. You want to know how the metabolites are breaking down. So I love, love, love that you just said that. Like,
Yeah. And for you, if
you're a great clinician. And I would be
yes.
thrilled for people to go see you. Like, that's where I'm like, yes, let's do that, because I keep hearing over and over again, don't worry, once you start hormones, you don't have to test. Doesn't matter. Don't worry about testing. And I'm like, whoa, what? Like, I
I
had a
disagree.
friend who was given crazy high dose of estrogen. Crazy. She was taking progesterone too. It was Prometrium, it was oral. And she wasn't getting tested, but she was having insane symptoms. So then we were like, when I had said to her, I'm like, you should go get your hormones checked. Like, go see where you're at. They were so high, Karen. And she never did, like, she didn't do a Dutch test. She didn't do a DNA test. So she didn't know how they were actually breaking down in her system. So I was like, I don't know. I just feel like I'm happy that you said that. So,
Yeah. And you can, it's the only test besides saliva. Like there's ZRT does saliva testing, but so does the Dutch. And on their complete urine metabolite test, you get what your cortisol is doing. And we
yeah.
need to see cortisol throughout the entire day. And yes, this is just a snapshot in time, and cortisol can change. And you'll hear practitioners say, like, oh, don't waste your money. It's just, you're only catching it a snapshot in time of cortisol. True, but as long as you had a normal day, that you normally have, and you didn't have any other influences coming in that are unusual, it's going to give you a really good idea of what your cortisol is doing throughout the day, every day. And you'll see women that'll be flatlined, and you can't tell me that, oh, this was just a snapshot in time. No, it doesn't. Your cortisol does not drop and flatline for the entire day, just one day. It doesn't, that's not how it works. And so to see somebody like that, or somebody that's like super high and they're like, oh, I just had a normal day. I had no fights with anybody. I wasn't in traffic. I had no stressful events, but yet their cortisol is up here throughout the entire day. And they're like, oh, I wonder why I'm not sleeping. That tells us a lot. And then we can say, oh my gosh, and you're getting all these symptoms of hormonal dysfunction, but yet your hormones look fine. So what does that tell us? It tells us that your cortisol is likely blocking the receptor, and you're not getting those hormones. It can also, do you know how many women I have caught hypothyroidism, undiagnosed hypothyroidism, by their Dutch test? Because if you have a low metabolized cortisol, that means like, how quickly are you metabolizing your cortisol? If it's low, 95, if not more % of the time is telling us that your thyroid is under functioning. Your thyroid runs the metabolism. So if you're not metabolizing that cortisol fast enough, it's going to show up. And then I say to them, you go get your thyroid panel done. And they're like, oh, what? Really? And I'm like, guarantee you're going to have a thyroid problem. Like 9 out of 10, they come back. Yep, I was right.
See, I love that. And I love that you know how to read the Dutch test really well. And that you're looking for certain things, whether I'm guessing in blood work as well. Like you could probably, so like Karen's nodding. So I'm like, she's like, yep. So you could see things. And I love that because you can dissect blood work, right? And that's a skill to be able to say, okay, I want you to go get this done. And then we can look to see what we think might be happening. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Because we can look at things like follicular stimulating hormones. So some women, they're unsure, and do I need estrogen? Do I not? Because perimenopause, this can go on for over a decade, and this is like this section of time where we're just right. Same. Like I've been in peri probably since my first child, when I was having all those hormonal issues. And I've been on and off progesterone like you. I was on and off progesterone for a long, long time, had my son at 38 and everything. Like I crashed after that time too, that pregnancy, and dang kids, they take everything out of you. But perimenopausal years, I mean, this is an entire decade or more for so many women. And we are not being treated properly. And labs have something to do with that, both negative and positive, where doctors can be like, oh, you're fine, you're in range and you're fine. But yet you're having all of these symptoms and going, well, maybe I'm getting hot flashes and night sweats and I don't feel good. And, I'm gaining weight. And let's say you're 46. And the doctor's like, yeah, but you're fine. Well, let's look at your follicular stimulating hormone, because FSH will start to go up if it's struggling to make that your body ovulate and to make that estradiol. And we know that women tend to feel their best when that FSH is under 10. We also know there's a correlation in the research that shows that when women get over 20 on their FSH, they see this correlation with weight gain. And so it'll keep going, just so your audience understands this. FSH keeps going up the further into menopause you go. So perimenopause, it starts to go up, and it'll continue unless you start HRT. I mean, I've seen women 150 FSH, and to me, that's wild. It's like our brain will never stop trying to get our ovaries to make hormones.
Right.
That's wild.
That is wild.
Right. And everyone's like, oh, but menopause is natural and we're not supposed to be messing with this. And it's like, but is it? I don't know.
That's interesting that it continues. So you mentioned the blood test, but can you just repeat it just as a summary? So for everyone listening to be like, okay, I know we actually have a top 10 list of blood tests for women to just ask their doctor for, but maybe you could just do a quick summary of it. I mean, you talked about FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone. You talked about LH, which is luteinizing hormone. You talked about the free. So maybe you can go through those.
Yeah. And so we want day 21, like I said. So that's very important. If you have a somewhat regular cycle or regular cycle, please just get it done on day 21. I just had a good friend of mine. I don't know if you know her, but I won't say her name just in case she doesn't want me to be publicly speaking about her. But anyways, she's a friend of mine. And so she's educated in hormones, thanks to me. But she was like, Karen, my hormones crashed. Oh my gosh, I've got no hormones. My estrogen was 10 or something, she tells me. And I'm like, wait a second. I'm like, are you missing your period? Is it getting lighter? Are you getting hot flashes? Is your vagina drying up? Anything? She's like, no, very regular. And I'm like, what day of the month did you test your estrogen on? She's like, day 2. I'm like, oh, like that's when our estrogen's the lowest. And so I was like, you're not having a hormone crash. And she was freaking out. Like she was like, she thought she was going into early menopause and was like, this is it. I'm done. And
So the
I'm
day
like,
is very important, but what if women
really
don't
important.
know what, like, because they're in perimenopause and their cycle is so erratic?
Yes. And so that we get a lot of that because we have so many women that are in that phase of like, I don't know, I just had 2 periods in a month. And so we basically say you do the best you can. And so if you're missing cycles, still track as though you had a cycle. So
Okay.
in your phone, like let's say it was supposed to come today and you're like, it doesn't come and it doesn't come. Well, put in your phone that it came anyways, because your body, it's very interesting. Even when you're in menopause, you'll hear women say, I still feel like my hormones cycle.
Yeah, they have phantom.
Yes. Yeah. And even when they get low, there's still cycling happening where they're fluctuating up and down and they'll still follow. And then when you get your period, if it happens to be on when it should come, great, then start counting from that as day 1. If it comes randomly, once again, you just go, okay, this is now day 1 of the cycle. And you do the best you can. And you just make sure that you keep track of where you tested, when you tested. So if you're like, okay, I haven't had a period for 6 weeks, so I'm just going to go test. And then 2 days later, you get your cycle. That just happened to me. I didn't have a period for 3 months. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go on what would have been a day 21. And literally the next day I got my period. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So then it's like, well, now I know, because then if you have a good practitioner who understands where the hormones are in the 28-day cycle, if you said to me like, oh, my period came 2 days after I took this test, then I'm going to know, okay, I have to look at this as though they're going to be a little bit lower than what they normally would be on day 21. And so you have to just kind of do what you can. There's not much else you can do, but still test, because there's still so many things you can test for, like even insulin and your fasting blood sugar and hemoglobin A1C, that influences our hormones, and our hormones, it is a hormone, insulin, but our sex hormones like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, they have a great impact on insulin, and insulin has a great impact on them. So doing things like that, your cholesterol, we know that women's cholesterol and their blood sugar go up as they start to lose estradiol specifically. So that can be another sign. We can look at a CBC panel with differentials and be able to see, oh, look, she's in an autoimmune flare, or she's got something going on with her gut. Her liver enzymes are high. Why is she getting fatty liver when she doesn't drink and she has a really clean diet? Maybe it's because she's losing estradiol and she's becoming more insulin resistant and she's not processing. So there's so much that we can tell by the most basic of blood work and just getting those basic hormones, the testosterone, free testosterone, estradiol, estrone, progesterone, your blood sugar panel. There's so much we can tell from that. And then we talk to you as a person and say, well, your labs might look great, Andrea, but how are you feeling? And what are you going through?
And that's the key too, right? Is asking them how they feel. It's not just a number on a piece of paper. And, it's interesting that you mentioned fatty liver, because when I was in perimenopause, I did, again, I mean, I didn't know what the word was, right, at the time, but I was having all these hot flashes and stuff. And I kind of got a gist that something was going on. I started taking all the supplements for menopause, or for hot flashes in particular. And one of the supplements I took had black cohosh in it, and another one had Vitex. And for me, and I'm not a fan of black cohosh. My listeners know that, and you would never find that in a supplement in for Morphus ever, because the research shows that it could actually cause liver issues down the road, and including fatty liver. And then I ended up going off it, and it ended up reversing. So, it's really important. So whatever you choose to do, ladies, whether it's hormones, whether it's supplements, it doesn't matter what it is. Make sure make sure that you understand what you're taking, why you're taking it, and then does it have an effect on certain things? And that's why I'm so insane with my supplement line, that I'm always researching it to the nth degree to see what could it affect down the road. And that's why I'm so particular with what we put out. And I know, Karen, I know you have a line of hormones. So can you talk a little bit about how, I'd like you to talk a little bit about how you can help women, but also when should women start thinking about taking hormones? Because now the Menopause Society, I think it was, they had said now you could start in perimenopause. Keep it, bring us up to date on what the research is saying and what experts are saying in terms of, if for those of you who want to take hormone therapy, how they should go about it.
Yeah, this is something I'm super passionate about right now, because even in the functional world and hormone, doctors that are up to date on hormone therapy, you'll still get so many of them that will say, we can't treat you with hormones until you're in menopause. The Menopause Society, what they came out with was we could stay on hormone replacement therapy now post 10 years post menopause, when before it was you had this 10-year window. If you didn't catch them then, forget it, you're not going on hormones, which is untrue. That specific thing had to do with taking oral estrogen. And oral estrogen, they saw after that 10 years of use post-menopause, started to raise your risk of heart attack and stroke because you were taking it orally. There's no increased risk of heart attack and stroke if you take estrogen transdermally. So we always say, even if it's bioidentical, avoid oral and always take it transdermally. So then you don't have to worry about it. And so the Menopause Society says you can stay on them for as long as you want, which is great, because most women are like, don't take me off my hormones, ever. This is what's keeping me youthful. And so the narrative has to change around, when do we start hormone replacement therapy with women in midlife? And so I can't tell you how many people, I just had a woman recently, she was 52 years old. She had been bleeding for 2 years straight, nonstop. She'd been to a nurse practitioner, her MD, a gynecologist, and a second gynecologist. Every single one of them said, we can't give you hormones because, and she was a listener of my podcast. She was a friend of mine. She actually came in with all this information from my podcast and said, I want hormone replacement therapy, please. I'm done having kids, just come on. And every single one of them denied her. And the only thing she was ever offered was birth control. And the birth control implant. So she got the birth control implant, which has progestin in it, which is the exact chemical that increases a woman's risk of getting breast cancer. So it's so backwards that we're offering women birth control pills or a hysterectomy or ablation instead of, here's your progesterone, which will counterbalance that growth of estrogen when your progesterone starts to grow. You don't have to get your uterus taken out, which is major. You don't have to get an ablation. You don't have to go on toxic birth control. You're done having kids. And so it's just it's crazy to me that we aren't treating women with bioidentical, body identical hormones when they're needed. Because I will tell you right now, when you're in your 40s and you are no longer ovulating because you no longer have eggs, and then you eventually get to the place where ovulation's done, your progesterone is done, your estradiol now is starting to come down or fluctuate wildly, there's no amount of any diet, exercise, supplementation that is going to bring back ovarian function. Yeah. So there's amazing supplements that we can take that bring us to a place in our perimenopausal journey. And then they can also help with some of the symptoms, but they don't bring, Vitex. You could take Vitex till you're blue in the face till you're 70. It's not going to bring back your progesterone. It's impossible. It can't. So everybody has to realize, doctors have to realize this, women have to realize this, that there's a time and a place, and we need the supplements 100%. Like, I'm all for supplementation. There's so much that it can do to help us metabolize these hormones, and they need to be
Oh
part
my
of
gosh.
this picture.
Totally. That's part of
100%.
our toolbox. But I agree with you. I am asked all the time, what supplements can I take as part of your Morphus line that increases my estrogen? I'm
Right?
like,
Yeah. It's like,
right.
no, there isn't.
You can't. Like, exactly. Like, if you want to increase your estrogen, I mean, you can obviously lean towards phytoestrogenic foods, which are going to be a
Yes.
form. But if you want to,
Yes.
really do, then you need hormones. Like, it's a different route, right? So no, I'm
Yes.
glad that
Yeah.
you said that, because I think it's an important point to say. And, I'm thinking back as you're speaking, I think it was 2016, probably somewhere around there, where I had my DNA test done, and it came back, and I remember the doctor who read me my results walked in, and he's like, "You're highly androgenic," but I could have just told, like, just by looking at you, like kind of what you said, exactly. That's why I laughed a little bit. You're like, "Oh, I look at you and I could see you're more androgenic," and I was like, "Okay." He's like, "So if you're on any type of hormones, bioidentical, doesn't matter," and I was on progesterone at that time. He's like, "Get off it now because of how your body metabolizes hormones." And I listened to him, and I did it. And now I'm thinking back going, my gosh, he probably did me a major disservice, because had I known to work with someone like yourself that, okay, so yes, I don't methylate properly, and my hormones shoot to the 4 and 16 more so than the 2. I could have been taking DIM. I could have been doing things that
Yes.
that could help with that conversion, right? So I'm just like, and I think back, and I'm like, but I was on progesterone probably for over 10 years for sure, like in my more fertile days. But like, I'm thinking that did me a disservice, because I suffered so
Yes.
much with so many symptoms. And that's what led me to start Morphus in the first place, because I was finding relief for
Good.
hot flashes and all of the symptoms that I had, the 103 plus that we now know about. But I'm like thinking, just finding yourself a good practitioner that understands genetics, understands methylation, understands the metabolites, understands hormones. It's so, if that is something you want to take, look, ladies, I don't judge either way. You want to take hormones, go for it. You can't, absolutely not. That's why, you could take supplements with your hormones. You could take it on your own. You could take hormones on its own, although I encourage you to take it with supplements. But like,
Yes.
a toolbox that's for everybody, right? And you
Yeah.
do what is best for your body, and what you discuss with your healthcare practitioner. So Karen,
Yeah.
I know you're based in Canada. Can you work? We have listeners from Canada. We have a lot of listeners from all over the world. And from the US as well. Where, like, can people work with you? Like you're obviously in clinic, like how can they work with you? And I know you have a line of hormones that they can purchase in the US. So tell us a little bit about you. And because of, just me listening to you, I'm like, oh my gosh, you'd be amazing to work with. And especially because for those of you who live in Canada, again, another question I am asked all the time. Do you have a doctor you could recommend that can help me with hormones? And, so I'm thinking, while you're not a doctor, you're a hormone expert. So it would be great for people to be able to consult with you. But can you work with people outside of Canada too? Like, how does it work?
Mm-hmm. So we have a telemedicine clinic. Our practitioners are based right now out of the United States. We can prescribe in every state in the US, and then we can prescribe in British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario in Canada.
Okay, interesting.
However, this is changing. Come next year, the time of this podcast is 2024. So come 2025, we are hiring some nurse practitioners that will be in charge of our Canadian branch, because right now it's all through the United States through our US doctors. And as you know, our dollar sucks. And so it's very expensive, and it's not attainable for a lot of people, especially for people that are used to free healthcare. And so Canadians typically don't like to spend money on their health. It's just because, we were born and raised in a country where we never had to pay for it. So we got that in our head that, hey, I shouldn't have to pay for my medical care. But doctors are, we know less than 7% of doctors are even trained in bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. They have to pay out of pocket to go and get that training. There's some naturopaths that can in certain provinces, but they can't prescribe testosterone. So Canada, it's a very challenging country to get hormones properly done, unfortunately. We are not as far ahead as the United States is, and it's really too bad. Americans are much more willing to spend the money on specialized care like that. So we can help people here. And we do have a group coaching program where we have women from all over the world, and we do weekly group coaching calls. You can get lab reads. And so that can sometimes be a really great option, because they can kind of take our recommendations, or they can work with one of our coaches who can say, hey, this is, based on your labs, here's what you're going to ask your doctor for. And you can take that to your doctor and say, look, I'm working with a menopause specialist. This is what she's told me to get on. Can you prescribe this for me? And it's like a 50-50. Some doctors are like, no, don't you tell me what to do. And I'm not going to do that for you. These hormones are going to kill you. Which, by the way, it's so funny that, even with the genetic thing, when you said that about the genetic specialist saying, get off progesterone, I've heard that from genetic specialists myself. And it's like, why is it that it's totally okay for us to have boatloads of progesterone from the time we are 12 to the time we're 45, 42? And nobody's going, we better check your genetics, Andrea, to see if you're processing your progesterone okay. Same with estrogen. We have boatloads of it, but yet when we start to lose it, it suddenly becomes this super dangerous hormone that we can't be prescribed until we have none and we're in menopause and we're a hot mess. That's not the way it should be treated. If we can catch these hormones going down in perimenopause at the right time, trust me, you will have a lot less of the symptoms that can come with this perimenopausal journey and menopausal journey. So you want to be treated as soon as these things start to happen. And sometimes that treatment might just be diet, lifestyle, and supplementation. Other times it might be like, okay, now's the time for hormones because your ovaries are going down. Like that's just, you're getting older. This is going to happen. And so you can try that with your doctors, which is great. If you're in the United States, you can purchase hormones, some hormones over the counter. And so I created my own line of over-the-counter they're called hormone cosmetic creams. And you can just, without a prescription, you can order them on our website. And we do ship to Canada. We don't take any responsibility for that. Like if there's duty fees and things like that, could get caught at the border and sent back because it's not legal here, right? So, it is available, but in the United States, it's available. And I did this specifically because I want women to be able to get the hormones if they want them, and not have this, depend on their doctors, that so many of them aren't going to treat them until they're in menopause, or even if they're in menopause, they're going to give them the smallest amount possible and they don't know what they're doing. And so they're available, they're clean, they have the same ingredient as far as like the hormone goes as what you would get at a pharmacy. So it's pure progesterone, estriol. We've got a progesterone cream that's 50 milligrams per dose. We've got a very high selling, or it's our best product. It's a biased face cream. It can be used on the body as well. We have a lot of women using it for vaginal dryness. It's not made for the vagina, but many women are using it for this purpose. But it is a very concentrated estrogen face cream. And in the research, it shows that within 6 months, there was a 60 to 100% decrease in pore size, which is why I started using estrogen on my face when I was in my early 40s, because my pores got super enlarged and I was horrified. I was like, what is happening? I had always had great skin, and then suddenly it was changing rapidly. And I did a bunch of research, and I read in this one paper, that it did that. And you won't find a pore on my face now, Andrea. Like there's totally done. Like it's gone. And it's been like that for 6 years. And so in that paper too, it showed that the wrinkle depth decreased and collagen production went up. Yeah. And so I've got all the links to that paper and a bunch of other links in this free ebook that I have on my shop site, which is karenmartell.com/shop. And you don't have to put your email in. It's just there. You just download it, and it kind of walks you through what are you looking for as far as symptoms go when it comes to hormonal loss. And maybe, okay, could you maybe need progesterone? Could you maybe need estrogen at this time? Kind of what the benefits are in the research when you start to supplement with these hormones. And so it's a really nice little guidebook for women that kind of want to do their own little DIY hormones. And so trying to do it the safest way possible. We always say, if you can't, obviously work with somebody. I mean, hormones are really finicky. Some people it's super straightforward, but for many it's not, because of how you're metabolizing. And we want to be specific about what supplements you're taking, depending on how you're processing your hormones and what you need help with, whether it's liver support or methylation or glucuronidation. Like, there's so many different things that can go into this. And then there's all these other hormones that are influencing your HRT. And so we want to look at the whole picture if we can, and we want you to test. So we do encourage that always. Our coaches can work with people worldwide. We have women in Kuwait, we've got Australia and New Zealand. We have women from all over the world that are either in our group membership program or come and see one of our coaches. We've got nurse practitioners that do the coaching and the prescribing for us. I'm in the more of the group coaching. I no longer take one-on-one clients for the coaching, but they've all trained under me, all of our coaches. So yeah,
Amazing.
little something for everyone.
And we'll put links below. And I know that for those who want to order your products, you're giving us our audience a 10% discount with using the code Morphus10. So we'll put we'll put everything below. So if you need to find it all in the show notes. So if you want to reach out to Karen or you want to purchase her hormones, you could use our code, and why not save some money while you're doing it, right?
Absolutely. Yes. It's very inexpensive too. Like, I actually found, for somebody that doesn't have coverage in Canada, it can definitely be cheaper. And it's same within the United States. Like, every bottle has at least 70 pumps per bottle. So if you're cycling your progesterone, well, that's going to last you for several months, and it's $54 a bottle, I think. I remember correctly. So it's really inexpensive compared to what some hormones are if you don't have insurance. So we wanted to make it affordable, accessible to the masses. And so we have something for every price point. We have, if you want that one-on-one care, we've got great, yearly programs for people that want that full body transformation. We use peptides. We do weight loss peptides, all the peptides, like the healing peptides, the immune system peptides. All of our one lady, our nurse practitioner, our main hormone coach, she's done specialized training in peptide therapy. And in HRT, we do physiologic restoration, like cycling of HRT, which, we can do either. We can do static. We really try and work with everybody individually. We don't follow any one set protocol because everybody's different.
That's very true. I couldn't agree more. So is there anything you want to leave with our audience before we end the interview?
That know that there's help. If you're in perimenopause, the attitude is not, I'm going to muscle my way through this time. You're not going to get a badge of honor for, how much you can suffer through this. That's not how it works. If you care about your health and longevity, then hormones are top of that list. We know, like, I'm sure you've talked about this lots, but the research shows the women that replace their hormones have over 30% reduction in all causes of mortality. Like, what supplement does that? What exercise does that? They're to be taken very seriously. And I want every woman to educate herself on it, which is what they're doing by listening to your podcast, which is great. So educate yourself on this, because you're not going to find, well, I shouldn't say that. It's hard to find a practitioner who is properly educated in it, especially with the timing piece. We can't feel our bones going. We can't feel the heart. We can't feel blood sugar getting dysregulated until it gets really bad. So these things that start to happen in our 30s, like we start losing bone, I think after the age of 25 or something ridiculous like that, but it will start to increase quite quickly as you start losing estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And it's not something we can feel or supplement out of. So making sure you're staying on top of this hormone loss, this ovarian loss of function, is the best thing that you can do to get through this time. And it's not all bad. Like we talk so much about all the stuff that can happen and coming down the pipeline and 14 years of perimenopause. But ladies, let me tell you, I don't know about you, Andrea, but this has been one of the best decades of my life. Once I got through that menopause storm that happened and I reversed everything and I came out the other side, it's been glorious. And I really feel like this is a time in our lives as women where we can really pay attention to ourselves, where we can go, what do I want in life, in everything, every aspect, spirituality, our work, our partners.
I love
It's
my
about
50.
us.
Love it. Love
Yes,
it.
I
I
can't
love
wait
it.
to get to 50.
I
I'm
love it.
48. I'm like, bring on 50. I feel good.
I love it. I love it. I feel more empowered now than ever.
Yes.
For me, there's so much good as we go into menopause. So, and that's something that we definitely want to leave you all with. And
Yes.
there are choices. Like we said, there's your toolbox. You can do, I mean, to me, the non-negotiables are nutrition and lifestyle. You've got your
Yep.
supplements. We have
Always.
our Morphus supplements, and then you have hormones and or hormones if that's what you choose to do. And
Yeah.
like Karen was saying, if you can, I mean, listen, it's not for everybody, and I totally understand
Yep.
that.
It's
And
not.
it's not for everybody, but if you're interested, reach out to someone like Karen and your team. I think that you provide a great service and an option for people to reach out to. So I will put
And it's
everything
coming to Canada. Like we can do it in Canada, but it's at a price. And so
I know.
I really want to make this accessible to Canadians.
It's interesting because you and I are both based in Canada, but yet we both sell our products in the US. Like we don't sell Morphus supplements in Canada. We try to, and kind of similar to what you're saying, like the duties, the taxes, the shipping, like it's a little complicated. And I've tried to explain it many times why we can't in Canada. There's Health Canada, there's other things that are involved, and hopefully one day we will come here too. But for those of you who are living in the US, you can get, Karen's products and you can get our supplements. So anyways, I appreciate you being on, Karen. I think you're awesome. And I'm happy that we finally made this happen.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Karen as much as I did. And if you're interested in trying her products, I left a link below, and you can use the code Morphus10 to get 10% off, as we discussed in the podcast. If you enjoyed it, please share it, because the more you share shows you care. And please, I would appreciate if you took a moment to rate and review our podcast, because when you do, it's sent out to more people, and we can help more people who are in perimenopause and menopause. Thank you for spending the last hour and a bit with me. As always, I know there's a lot of other things you could be doing, but instead you chose to spend your time with me. And for that, I am grateful. I'll see you at the next interview.